industrial base, the commercial entities that are out there to help us get to that success. So it's not only, hey, we're doing great things out here, we're relying upon everybody, not only utility providers, obviously, the military buys most of their power from the local utility grid, so it's important to understand that if that goes down, I have to make sure that I can still, again, can play my mission. I'm going to beat that drum over and over. And most of the times, it's only a certain part of the base that needs to be on. Let's say it's a a communication station. If it's a runway, if it's a pier side, if it's a handling wharf, a nuclear handling wharf, those things have got to be up 100% of the time for me to have my mission to be completed. So microgrids, as I start off with, very important to us, but we can't do it alone. We really do depend upon the commercial aspects of you all out here to help us be successful and protect the country. With that, I'll turn it over to my Air Force teacher.
Thanks, Matt. So one of the things that we're focusing through is looking at history, but looking towards the future. And so our mantra is digitization, decarbonization, and decentralization. And the systems that we're looking to deploy and implement are based on those foundational principles. And what we're seeing is the ability to decentralize, but you have to have the digitization to be able to do that. And once you're able to do that, now you can start looking at bringing microgrid assets to play effectively. And that then leads to decarbonization, because there's going to be more utilization of non-traditional electric generation resources away from rotational generation resources. And it's a bold stroke to try and move this forward, but it's something that industry definitely needs to accomplish and needs to be there to help. Mostly because and this is not any surprise to anyone here in the room, we have a capacity crunch that's going to hit really hard and quite soon. The last time I checked, we're not building very many new power plants. And electrification is high on the list, starting with electric vehicles and moving towards things like electric boilers. So when you start looking at the math, and this is also something that impacts our friends in the transmission and high-level transmission and distribution world, there aren't enough electrons being moved around, which means we need to get closer to the source. And that really is not the ultimate answer, but it's the answer for the next several years, is to get closer to the source, be tighter. The centralized utility design has worked great for 100, when did INSOL start? Early 1900s, late 1800s, right? So 130 years, it's worked really well. But things are changing. And so we need to have the centralized utility input combined with the decentralized capabilities of microgrids to really unlock the capabilities of having resiliency, sustainability, and meeting those goals that we're trying to throw out there that we would like to achieve, and not hamper our mission capabilities, whether that be the military or whether that is manufacturing, data centers. That's one thing we were talking about around lunch, is the advent of all the data centers. And data centers are energy hogs, to say the least, right? So how do you balance that equation? That part is simple. It's a math equation. Energy in, energy out. Then how do you fill in the blank to make the equation balance properly? That's part of what we're trying to determine means via technology to be able to help bring that to bear. It's fun. It's frustrating. It's fast-paced. The days change. Some of the things that we're trying to accomplish, there's a unit sitting in Wiesbaden at an Army base that is a microgrid in a box for 1.5 makes the speed to the target slow down. So we in industry are trying to figure out how to make that move faster so that we can help match things up. That's the future that we see. That's the future that we're reaching.
I feel that was a really good segue because I could expand upon the risks at the transmission level. Real quick before I get started, NERC and the regions, we're not lobbyists. We don't pick winners and losers in the great energy transition. We used to say that we were resource agnostic, but that wasn't the right word because we do care. We're more resource neutral. And we know that all the resources on the grid have different essential reliability services. They all work in different ways, whether it be their ramping, their voltage support, fast frequency response, black start capabilities, all of those things. At the end of last year, NERC got a lot of attention when they published their long-term reliability assessment. And if you haven't seen it, I recommend you take a look at it because the long-term reliability assessment took a look out into the future about 10 years, and it showed 2/3 of the country was at risk of being resource deficient. And quite simply, the generation retirements due to both energy policy, decarbonization goals, and economics are outpacing the new resources that are coming online. And the challenge is that we have a lot of new resources online. If you look at the queues for PGM and MISO and the RTOs, they have hundreds of thousands of megawatts in the queue ready to interconnect and being studied. And the reality is, due to a lot of different things, whether it be investments, permitting, siting, transmission upgrades, they're not coming on as quickly as we would like. To make matters even worse, that study was somewhat conservative because it only looked at known generation retirements. Based on upcoming EPA legislation and other state renewable portfolio mandates, we might see even more advanced retirements of generation that weren't even studied before. So we're at a real crunch here because we are at a time, as you said, that we're going into ultra electrification, not just the EVs and data centers, but artificial intelligence uses a lot of electricity, the heat pumps, the microchips, all those things, at a time where we need electricity more than ever. So at NERC in the regions, one of our main goals is to identify risks, mitigate risks, and be excellent risk communicators. And how I started off was that we could learn a lot from not just the other interconnects out in the West and in Texas, but also from other countries. And I know there's been a lot of positive momentum towards microgrids, and I think microgrids can be a very important part of the grid of the future. But what I challenge the audience to do is to not think about the benefits of the microgrids, and there are, but think about what can go wrong. Think about what are the challenges. What challenges can we learn from the transmission system? What things do we need to mitigate that so that if we do and when we invest in these microgrids, that they're reliable, that they're resilient, and they're secure. When we talk about the digitization, on the high voltage grid, we have very, very important cybersecurity standards where our SCADA and EMS networks are segregated from the internet, and there's protections in place and patching and perimeters so that our adversaries don't hack and take control of our grid. This is a real risk. Back in 2015 or so, Russia took control of Ukraine's grid, and if you remember the story, they were able to open up breakers remotely. Imagine our adversaries getting into our SCADA and EMS systems and being able to trip generators and open breakers. And we've seen this in other critical infrastructures. We've seen this with Colonial Pipeline hack, the Colonial Pipeline hack, and others. And even just the other day, there was a big hack at the MGM resorts where no one could get into their room. So as we implement these microgrids, I challenge the audience to think, what can go wrong? Regulation is often seen as a bad word because it's an enemy to innovation and moving forward at speed. But regulation is very important. We've learned a lot over the last 20 years since the 2003 blackout. We've learned of important regulations that we need to get things right. And we still look at new standards today. We look at things such as internal network security monitoring and data communication between control centers and how we're going to implement and integrate all these inverter-based resources. The inverter-based resources, while everyone is excited about the renewables and the retirement of fossil fuels, the inverter-based resources just work differently. We can talk about the technical challenges such as the short circuit and the inertia and the relay settings. That's not even going into the intermittency. And it's not that we're against renewables. We just want to make sure that we're communicating, collaborating, with industry and academia and vendors and others to make sure that we're getting this great energy transition right. And what I also challenge the audience to do is to be open to a lot of different solutions for this grid of the future, because it's never just one thing. For some people, they think, long-term energy storage, and long-term energy storage probably has a very, very big part of the grid of the future. Or it could be offshore wind. And some people are hitching their wagon to small modular reactors replacing coal because nuclear has no carbon emissions and it can be a great resource for us. Some people have invested billions of dollars into hydrogen, and they were thinking that at night when we have excess wind, we can produce the hydrogen, and that can be the new natural gas, the new dispatchable resource. And maybe it's a combination of a lot of those things. Maybe it's even things we haven't even thought of yet. Maybe it's new innovation, maybe it's geothermal. I encourage you to keep looking at other countries, other critical infrastructures, look to see what natural gas is doing, look to see what water is doing, cons are doing. These are very important challenges, and these are challenges that we have to solve together. So once again, thank you so much for the opportunity to participate in this panel, and we'll kick it over to Dr. Cook.
Okay. In regards to the history part, I will say, I have three passions: ensuring and understanding the gravitas of my children's emotional well-being. And fun fact, emotion means energy in motion. So, I'm all about managing my children's emotions. But also history is a huge passion of mine, always has been. And I think, really, when I think about, I came out of school, 4 years, electrical engineer. I chose it because my father told me it would open doors that I never knew existed. That has been true. But I didn't know what a power system was 4 years out. But I met, and I had the opportunity to have an amazing coach, mentor, first boss. And so I'm going to talk a little about the people that it's going to take for this transformation. And when you think about understanding where you came from, so then you can level set where we are, so that you can then prepare for the future, should really be the basis of really all the questions and the actions that you're doing. And also knowing the collaborative parties that you're working with, to ensure that you're tying and understanding where they're coming from and what perspective. And quite honestly, we all come from a place of good, positive intent. So if the North Star, the vision, which I'm going to use that one forever, without the resources and the hallucination, maybe that's why I make a lot of friends. They all think I'm hallucinating. But my vision for the utility is full situational awareness to the edge, which means we must baseline the current performance of our assets, because we have a very old infrastructure here. So we all talk about utilities. Why is the current assets as old as they are? I had the opportunity to be around when we pulled out Westinghouse, who's the father of our grid in Pittsburgh. George Westinghouse, who ultimately bought Tesla's patent, who ultimately propagated and drove the grid that we have today. I actually tricked my girlfriend for a road trip, and it was to Toledo, Ohio, to go to the Lake Erie, but it's really because, Edison's place. And then I went to Sam Insel to listen to YouTube videos as I walked the streets of Chicago early morning, and Insel gets a lot of credit. But anyway, understanding the regulatory model and the business model of why utilities continue to show up the way they are is also important. So I think when you think about it, so I come into the utility and I'm the transmission planning manager, and I find there's so much excitement about transmission build. Why is that? I'll leave that for another forum. And it is highly protected, and it's federally regulated, and there's a significant amount of standards and requirements that are being driven by the people in the utility to ensure that it's safe, secure, and can provide power reliably, resiliently, robustly, securely. Those metrics, those values are very different to the perspective of the customer that we all are here to serve, which is the customer who's the edge, which for the transmission grid, if things are going down, what we do is we open breakers and cut off the customer. Safely, securely, and in ways that doesn't do a rolling blackout and have the 2003 event. From a distribution owner perspective, the last thing we're ever even allowed to talk about is shutting off a customer. They are the ones that are paying the bill for their 24/7, 365 power, and don't you dare to shut off your power even planned. That's the expectation of our customer these days. So you're challenged by the people that are the how, and they're the ones that are coming up with the why. So we all understand the what, which could be microgrids. So I guess I just share from, here's the transmission planning manager walking in, everyone's excited about transmission. I learned very quickly, even within the walls of the utilities that I was driving consulting for, didn't fundamentally understand the huge difference between the transmission and distribution system. How they're operated, how they're designed, what you're preparing for, what you're designing for, and what are the impacts of all of this new technology. That was like an aha moment. So I actually prepared